This is a three-part film about a voyage across the South Atlantic Ocean from Cape Horn to the Cape of Good Hope. Part 1 covers the Trans-South Atlantic Ocean voyage from Ushuaia to see the amazing wildlife of the Falkland Islands, and then on across a sea full of whales to arrival off South Georgia. Our voyage started from Ushuaia with a transit to the Falkland Islands.
Because we were traveling for 3.5 months, our luggage was very heavy, with our main pieces weighing 32 kilograms each. This made moving around a bit of a challenge. On the day of our departure from Ushuaia, the giant 2,600 passenger Golden Princess was on the pier opposite our small Silver Explorer, which holds 130 passengers.
Late in the afternoon, we boarded the Silver Explorer that would be our home for the next 60 days until we reached Lisbon, Portugal.
Our ship had a level of service and luxury that we had never experienced before or since. The luxuries included a supply of drinks in our cabin per our tastes.
From Ushuaia, we sailed east down the Beagle Channel, then entered the Southern Ocean and crossed over to the Falkland Islands.
It was exciting to sail from Ushuaia's pier and start our 65-day voyage of adventure.
Once aboard, we had the mandatory lifeboat drill as we sailed away. The 150 passenger lifeboats were interesting to say the least.
Once out of the Beagle Channel and crossing the Southern Ocean to the Falkland Islands, we could watch the ocean-going seabirds around the ship, including the albatrosses and the beautifully patterned painted petrel. The albatrosses were the black-browed albatross and the wandering albatross. The wandering albatross has the largest wingspan of any living bird, ranging up to 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet. Wandering albatrosses spend most of their lives in flight, landing only to breed and feed.
There you go.
All right. That was a great opening.
After a day in transit from Ushuaia, we arrived in the Falkland Islands and went ashore at New Island, then West Point Island, and finally at Port Stanley. Our first stop in the Falklands was at New Island, which was long used as a base for whaling and then as a sheep farm. We started our day with a short Zodiac shuttle ride into Coffin's Harbour on New Island and then hiked about 1.5 kilometers to the Rookery. The birds at the landing site were eating bright green sea lettuce, which I sampled. It had an interesting taste, but it was strongly salty, due in part to the seawater still on the plant. The small museum at the beach housed some tools of the island's whaling past. At the landing beach and in front of the museum is the wreck of the Protector 3, which was beached in 1969 and is slowly breaking up. This ship was built as a Canadian minesweeper but ended up sealing and carrying freight in the Falkland Islands. Leaving the beach, we trudged across the island to the Rookery on steep cliffs where rockhopper penguins, black-browed albatrosses, and blue-eyed shags were breeding. It was quite a windy spot, but perfect for the wind-riding albatrosses to take off. Fledgling albatrosses sat on their impressive nests and their parents arrived back to feed them by regurgitating food. Once a year, penguins molt in what is called a catastrophic molt. Since unlike most birds that molt a few feathers at a time, penguins molt all of their feathers at once. With its new feathers, the rockhopper penguins are beautiful with ruby-colored eyes. At the rookery, caracaras hung around, looking for food, be it eggs or chicks. Soon it was time to leave and return to the ship, so we trudged back across the island past the upland geese, the males distinguished by their white heads and breast. Leaving New Island astern, we sailed towards West Point Island, with the ship heeled over by a 60-knot wind. West Point Island is an island that is run as a sheep farm, although in the early 19th century, West Point was a popular site for slaughtering seals and penguins for oil. We anchored offshore at West Point Island in strong winds. Despite the strong winds, we went ashore in the bay via Zodiac. There were 3 visiting boats in the bay, one of which belonged to the German couple who are now running the sheep farm. We made the long 3-kilometer walk across the island to the rookery to see the usual suspects, consisting of rockhopper penguins, black-browed albatrosses, and blue-eyed shags. The albatrosses glided with ease in the blustery winds. Down below the rookery, the penguins and seals dotted the cliffs above the stormy sea. The fledgling albatrosses were still reliant on their parents to bring them food and then regurgitate it for them. In the heart of the rookery were a number of caracaras feeding on the remains of an albatross chick. Leaving the rookery, we visited the farmhouse for a delightful snack of coffee and treats. The couple running the sheep farm keeps up the tradition of preparing treats for island visitors. They made plenty of treats, since waiting several miles away to land on the following day was the MS Fram, with a capacity of 276 passengers. As we sailed for Port Stanley, one of the visiting boats at West Point Island motored out of the bay and wallowed along in the heavy swells. Port Stanley is the capital of the Falkland Islands and has a population of about 2,200 people. This small town is technically a city since it has a cathedral. We arrived at Port Stanley's outer harbour in the morning and made our way down the outer harbour past the sandy beaches and through the narrow passage into the inner harbour. Scanning around the inner harbour in the distance was the hulk of the beautiful iron bark named Lady Elizabeth that was launched in 1879 and went aground in Stanley in 1936. Stanley is a pretty town with colourful houses and roofs. Christchurch Cathedral, consecrated in 1892, is the southernmost Anglican cathedral in the world. We went ashore to Stanley via Zodiac and landed by a longliner that targets Patagonian toothfish in Antarctica. In front of the cathedral stands a whalebone arch, made from the jaws of two blue whales. The arch was raised in 1933 to commemorate the centenary of the British rule in the Falkland Islands. There are many beautiful flowers growing around the town that make for interesting viewing. SS Great Britain, when launched in 1843, was the largest vessel afloat. After a fire on board in 1886, she was found on arrival at Port Stanley to be beyond economic repair and left there until 1970, when she was returned to Bristol and restored as a museum ship. The 1982 Liberation Memorial was designed by a Falkland Islander and was built as a tribute to the British forces and civilians who lost their lives during the conflict. Each year a ceremony is held on the 14th of June, Liberation Day. A bust of Margaret Thatcher was installed in 2015 and condemned by Argentina. It displays Thatcher's 1982 statement about the Falkland Islands people that, quote, "They are few in number, but they have the right to live in peace, to choose their own way of life, and to determine their own allegiance." From Stanley, we were driven out to Bluff Cove to see the colony of some 2,000 Gentoo and king penguins on a tranquil lagoon. We passed by minefields left by Argentine invaders in 1982. Argentina brought some 25,000 anti-vehicle and anti-personnel mines to the Falklands. However, only about 5,000 have been accounted for. Mine clearance teams from Zimbabwe are working to clear the remaining mines. We traveled by Land Rover across boggy and rocky scrubland of a sheep farm to Bluff Cove Lagoon to see the colony of some 2,000 Gentoo and king penguins, and then take tea beside the ocean. And do younger sheep have better wool than older sheep?
They start out fine, sir. They know, and then as they get older,
We watched the penguins from the rookery making the long trek along the lagoon to the ocean. Just before reaching the ocean, the penguins had to cross a stone barrier. The surf gave the penguins pause for concern. Finally, before departing, we warmed up with a cup of tea, scones, and local diddle-dee jam, served at the excellent Sea Cabbage Cafe. The Sea Cabbage Cafe and adjoining Bluff Cove Museum are tucked under a grass bank, facing a beautiful long white sand beach. Bluff Cove was the site of a deadly attack by Argentinian aircraft on British transport ships during the Falklands War. The Land Rovers used to transport people to the Cove are interestingly decorated and proudly display their determination to decide their own future. The drive back across the boggy and rocky scrubland was like a cross-country rally and hence very entertaining.
Oh, now I feel like you're in a race. Like I think in Africa.
A lot of speed bumps in them.
Yeah, in Africa they have.
Roll it over. And how many times do you shear the sheep? Once a year?
Once a year.
How long does that take to do your 2,000?
We passed by fascinating examples of stone runs noted by early European visitors to the Falklands, including Charles Darwin in 1833. These runs look like stone rivers, and their formation is attributed to a myriad of freeze-thaw cycles during the last ice age. Back in Stanley, we returned to the ship, and it was anchors away as we set sail on a 2-day voyage to South Georgia. Pulling up anchor, we turned about and headed out of the inner harbor past the Sea Explorer, an expedition ship, and out through the narrow channel into the outer harbor. Once through the channel, we made a sweeping turn east into the outer harbor, passing a sailboat that was motoring along. In the outer harbor, we passed by the World War II harbor defense guns on the hills and the penguins on the sandy beach. It was from the outer harbor that the Royal Navy Squadron sailed to defeat an Imperial German Navy squadron in the Battle of the Falkland Islands in December 1914 during the First World War. Leaving the Falklands, we made a 2-day transit to South Georgia, which turned out to be a highlight of our voyage due to a remarkable encounter off Shag Rocks. Nearing Shag Rocks, we encountered an area of huge icebergs. At Shag Rocks, we sighted a single fin whale beside our ship.
Of the ship is a fin whale. We do have confirmation that we did see a blue whale. It has gone further to the right, to the starboard side, past Shag Rocks. But at the moment, at the 1 o'clock position, quite close to the ship, we do have a fin whale.
Incredibly, the single fin whale sighting suddenly became an amazing sight of a sea filled with fin whales. The fin whale is the second largest animal on Earth after the blue whale. It can grow to 27.3 meters and weigh nearly 82 short tons. Seeing a single fin whale is exciting, but seeing an ocean full of them is incredible. Mammals and birds were attracted to Shag Rocks by a swarm of tiny krill. Fur seals joined the whales in the krill feeding frenzy. Nobody aboard the ship had ever seen such a large grouping of whales in their many decades of experience in the Southern Ocean. A count of whales was made, and it was estimated that up to 500 whales were in the area. Incredibly, whales were everywhere that we looked in a 360-degree field of view. The number and variety of seabirds in the area made for a birder's delight. The ocean around Shag Rocks was full of fin whales, just like the Southern Ocean described by early Antarctic explorers before the golden age of whaling. There were also penguins in the feeding frenzy. Until the end of the 19th century, whalers viewed blue and fin whales as being of little value. They wanted right whales and hunted them to near extinction. However, with the demise of the right whale population, whalers turned their industry towards the capture of blue and fin whales, eventually reducing the population of each from hundreds of thousands to near extinction. Over 2 million whales were taken in the southern hemisphere during the 20th century. Apart from fin whales, there was the odd humpback whale chowing down on the krill. Whales and fur seals operated in very close vicinity. After an hour of observing the mayhem, we had to resume our voyage to South Georgia, and so we departed Shag Rocks. Seeing all the animals in a krill feeding frenzy was an unforgettable experience that was the highlight of our Cape-to-Cape crossing. As night fell, the ship's searchlights were illuminated to detect ice in front of the ship.
In part 2 of this film, we'll make 8 separate landings on South Georgia to see that isolated island's amazing wildlife and scenery.
Take me somewhere.